Germany, the largest country and economic powerhouse of Europe, was once one of the most stable nations on the continent, and perhaps worldwide. However, in recent years, it has been confronted with one crisis after another. Immigration waves, climate disasters, and the threat of war with Russia since the start of the conflict in Ukraine. All of this, worsened by years of economic stagnation, is starting to erode the confidence of German citizens in their government and its ability to protect them.
I used to have trust in the government.
I don't think Germany could protect its people in a real emergency.
Naturally, everyone in this bunker shares a common goal: to survive.
But things are slowly changing, and the country is trying to get back on its feet, even if not everyone agrees on how to do it. Germany on alert.
In fact, we have seen in recent crises and disasters that Germany hasn't been well prepared.
First of all, it needs to be said that over the past 30 years, the German military has been drastically downsized.
We simply assumed that major crises, disasters, or even armed conflicts in Europe, in Germany, would never happen again.
I think what we have to understand is that we have to prepare on a large scale right now. We are facing a real threat, and it's knocking on our door, and it's just before 12.
Short before midnight, and the clock is ticking. So, how did the Germans get here? Since the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, successive German governments have based their foreign policy on the principle of peace through economic strength. The core idea, known as Wandel durch Handel, change through trade, was to build deep economic ties, even with potential enemies like Russia, so that it would become counterproductive for each part to start a conflict. This system appeared to work for years, leading German governments to substantially cut budgets for the military, civil protection, and emergency shelters, among other security infrastructure, as they reaped the so-called peace dividend.
We are facing a new kind of threat now, and we have to prepare for it. And that also means ramping up our forces, instructing and practicing again and again and again.
Of course, the question is how quickly we can make that happen. We have been asleep far too long. Now we have woken up, and it's time to get up and regain control.
Taking all under control again, not an easy task. A perfect example is the air raid bunker system. Back in 2007, the German government decommissioned the whole system. They determined that these shelters were insufficient against modern threats and that their maintenance was simply too expensive. We visited one of those old bunkers in the center of Berlin, a true survivor from World War II. Inside, Sasha gives us some realistic numbers on just how many of these facilities are still usable today.
Jetzt würde ich sagen, es ist eine Handvoll.
I would say it's just a handful, 4 or 5 plants that we consider to be ready for use in a short time. But the question is always, ready for what? What kind of threat are we expecting? What level of protection is needed? What worries us even more is that German society as a whole is barely prepared for a scenario like this. Fortunately, for decades, we have not been used to living in conflict situations, and the pain would be much bigger than, for example, in Ukrainian society.
The war in Ukraine is acting as a detonator for German citizens, forcing them to realize that in the event of an attack, they have virtually no place to hide. As a result, citizens are starting to take things into their own hands, and the civil protection business is booming. This ranges from discount supermarkets selling gas masks and pop-up panic rooms, all the way up to specialized companies that offer to build a complete bunker in your basement. We decided to visit one of these companies in Bavaria to learn exactly what kind of services they are offering.
Also in unserem Showroom zeigen wir alle Komponenten, die Sie eben benötigen für einen Schutzraumbau.
So in our showroom, we display all the components you need to build a safe room. And here is a representation of how a typical shelter is set up. Every safe room should have an armored door, an emergency exit in case the main door is blocked, so you can always get out, a ventilation system, and the basic essentials are beds and a dry toilet.
What are people most worried about when they come to you for a private bunker?
On the one hand, they get the news about what's going on in world politics. On the other hand, they know that there is not a single functioning shelter in Germany. And then they take care of themselves, their children, their grandchildren, because no one knows if anything will happen, and at best, they won't need the shelters.
When it comes to bunkers, German citizens often compare themselves to countries like Finland or Switzerland. In those nations, the government maintains enough shelter space for everyone in case of an attack. One of those citizens is Christian Klaus, who is building his new house in the idyllic alpine region of Allgäu. And right underneath it, he's building a lifesaver for himself and his family.
So, what is it actually designed for? What can the bunker withstand?
It could withstand a nuclear attack within 500 meters. Without any problems.
An atomic explosion 500 meters away from this little village seems improbable. But what level of protection does this bunker provide?
So the facility itself, the floor, walls, and ceiling, actually exceeds military standards when it comes to safety.
On average, how long does it take to plan and build a bunker like this?
I'd say the planning takes about a day and a half.
Okay.
To build it, we were relatively quick. I think a week and a half or 2 weeks.
So fast? Wow. And how much does it cost?
I estimate it was around 80 or 85.
85,000 euros seems a lot, but not that much if you think it can save your life and that of your family. But does he really think he'll need to use the bunker in the future?
I think yes, it could be. Will it be a nuclear attack? We don't know. But I'd say we have to look at how Germany's been going. Look at the last few years, for example, with Ukraine. We've been a bit arrogant about what we technically and militarily have and are capable of compared to other countries. We are really not at the level. Now, Germany wants to take action, of course. But you can't make up for the last 50 years in just a year or two. So I'd say that not much will change before the next 10 or 20 years until we reach standards that are considered acceptable.
It remains to be seen if Christian is right that it will take another 15 years for Germany's defense and protection systems to be truly ready. In the meantime, government institutions, and particularly the military, are going full gas on expanding and training alongside other actors in the civil protection landscape. In Hamburg, at the end of September 2025, the city hosted one of the biggest training exercises it has ever seen. Red Storm Bravo.
What we are observing is that Russia has switched to a war economy. And that's why we believe that we have to assume that by 2029 at the latest, Russia will be militarily strong enough to test NATO. And that has a certain probability, and we are preparing for this probability, for this scenario.
This 3-day exercise focused on the coordination between the military, police, and fire services, simulating the deployment of NATO troops to Germany's eastern border in the event of an escalating conflict in the Baltic state. Jill Long, the director of the Democratic Resilience Center in Hamburg, is there today as an observer and advisor for the German military.
I don't think we understand it well enough. That the threat has been there, it's been escalating. We have hybrid warfare, we have gray zone conflict, drones flying over airports, cyber attacks, transnational criminal activity. All of that erodes our security.
These attacks or minor provocations are difficult to defend against, as they appear random and disconnected and are easy to deny. Yet, they have a strong impact on the population, creating fear and distrust in the government's ability to provide protection.
Personally, I just wish we were running instead of walking, but that's just my personal opinion. Hopefully we can manage the security environment so that we have enough time to build that resilience. And if not, then the urgency will be there and everyone will start running.
This urgency is slowly building momentum in Germany, and there are different responses from different areas of society. One of those responses is technological, and it is on its way. Military startups are booming in Germany. One of them is ARC's Robotics. Their robot, the Gereon, is already helping soldiers on the front lines in Ukraine.
Wir haben eine Entität in der Ukraine selber.
We have a presence in Ukraine and a team of several people on the ground. This means that we deliver our systems to the armed forces. We also train them on site. We provide support and carry out repairs. We do everything possible to assist the troops at the front.
This robot can carry up to 500 kilograms and take different payloads. It can carry supplies, evacuate wounded soldiers, or transport equipment directly to the front line, thus making the life of the ground soldier easier. Another feature is how easy it is to learn to use it.
Of course, we are looking at larger systems, things like self-propelled howitzers or Leopard tanks. Training soldiers on those takes months.
The war in Ukraine is one of the key motivations pushing Germany to invest heavily in its military and defense system. Chancellor Merz recently announced the goal to reach 3.5% of GDP in military spending by the end of the decade, effectively more than doubling the defense budget and peaking at 153 billion euros annually. However, not everyone in German society supports this decision. On the same weekend as Red Storm Bravo, the left-wing party Die Linke organized a massive demonstration in Hamburg, where thousands protested the military exercise and the defense budget allocation.
Wir sind gegen diese Militärübungen in der Stadt.
We are against these military exercises in the city. First, because we are critical of rearmament in the militarization of society. Secondly, they never answer the question, how much do we actually need? Do we need military spending as high as Russia's? If you then look at the European NATO partners alone, this amount would already be reached. And if you include the USA, then you are about 10 times as high. How much equipment do we need? The question isn't being answered. Instead, people talk about essentially endless rearmament. And that doesn't make us safer. It makes us less secure, because it causes instability in the world.
David is not the only one who disagrees with the direction that the German government is taking regarding the military. There are voices concerned that there is too much alarmism in society at the moment.
The worst-case scenario would then be a Russian attack on German territory, and I consider that extremely unlikely. In the debate, we almost act as if we are completely defenseless. However, this is not a realistic picture of the situation. We have more than doubled our defense budget since 2014, and NATO is far stronger than its opponent or enemy, Russia. And we act as if we were completely exposed, defenseless, and unprotected. I don't think that paints a real picture of the situation.
As well as Mr. Varvik, some politicians and civil society groups are afraid that following the line of militarization could mark the beginning of a steady escalation with Russia, further endangering the population.
More weapons have never brought more security in history. If we keep pouring money into armaments and build the infrastructure to use them, at some point the question becomes, what do we do with all these weapons? And I don't think they'll just sit around unused. We'll likely start creating scenarios where, putting it a bit harshly, we clear the yard, just so we can deploy them and keep the arms industry running.
The fears are clear. More arms exports, increased military deployment in other conflicts, and, ultimately, a militarization of society.
Of
course, we don't want to militarize everyday life, but we also need to show that we have the capabilities. Only by demonstrating them can we create credible deterrence. So the matter does belong in the public eye, but it must be handled carefully. That's why, for example, at Red Storm Bravo, we did this convoy exercise at night.
The night convoy. 70 tracks that had to cross Hamburg toward the east. An exercise to see how the military and police coordinate when a bunch of protesters stop the convoy. They remove the protesters safely, and the convoy can keep on. But it raises some questions about its purpose. Why use such a scenario? Is it not adding more fire to an already hot discussion between pro-military spending and the ones that are against?
But of course it's not funny at all, because this maneuver is another step toward the militarization of our city. We need disarmament instead of social cuts. We demand investment in education, health, and social welfare instead of war preparation. And we say loud and clear, we do not want to be part of your war, because the real dividing line is not between peoples or countries, but between top and bottom.
A division between the rich and the poor that, as in many other countries, is destabilizing democratic institutions and fueling unrest. Hit by high energy prices, fierce competition from China, and near-record unemployment, Germany is now at a crossroads. The challenges are immense: saving the middle class, reinventing the decaying industry, and updating its slow bureaucracy, all while building up military and civil protection. It's not an easy task to accomplish all at once, and something will inevitably have to be sacrificed. Therefore, it's understandable that some of the population is angry when they hear the ultimate goal is to allocate 5% of GDP, almost 220 billion euros, to the military budget, while other critical issues take a back seat.
This
5% target has completely lost any sense of proportion. I think it's vastly exaggerated. It would mean tripling Germany's already sizable defense budget. And we also need to consider what kind of reactions this would provoke from a political opponent. With this 5% target and the whole debate around it, we're heading straight into a classic security dilemma where defense budgets on both sides spiral upward.
But ultimately, it won't make us any safer.
This security dilemma or spiraling arms race is a well-known situation from the Cold War, where the US and the Soviet Union ended up trapped in a military action-reaction loop that was close to bringing nuclear destruction upon the world. Ironically enough, Germany was one of the main arenas where those dangerous games were played. So, how is Christian planning to survive a possible nuclear fallout?
In the event of a nuclear attack, radioactive particles would be in the air. And to filter them out, we have a special filter. This one down here. It's installed in a separate chamber. If during a nuclear attack, any air containing radioactive particles were drawn in, the lead container could emit radiation into the room where I'm staying. To prevent that, there is an additional radiation protection wall.
Filter against nuclear radiation locked by a 30-centimeter wide door in case there are leaks. Christian really thought of everything.
At the moment of the explosion, the valve closes automatically under pressure. So the shockwave can't enter the room. Otherwise, our eardrums and lungs could burst. These are the kinds of injuries that would ultimately be fatal. The shockwave itself is also deadly, not just the explosion. In fact, it's the most lethal part of all. So that's the main component for survival. Without this valve, the whole bunker would be useless.
Christian's bunker will soon be ready for him and his family. But does that make him any less afraid?
It's not about fear for me. I'm not afraid at all. I've had solid military training, and I think I'd be the calmest person in that moment because I'd know what to do more than most others. But that's not the point. I see it in Ukraine. The men are on the front lines, and it would affect me just like it would many other Germans. The family is at home and unprotected. They don't have a safe room. They have nowhere to go.
Like Christian's family, there are many other people who will need help in case of a crisis, be that a blackout, a natural disaster, or a virus outbreak. But with so few places in the German bunker system, who will be allowed a place inside them in case of an attack?
Looking at the past and at Cold War-era concepts, that includes doctors, all kinds of support personnel, police, the military, authorities, politicians, and critical infrastructure engineers we rely on. Those are the groups, and just by counting them, it becomes clear that even for them, there wouldn't be enough space.
And among those that will be helping citizens in case of disaster is the German Red Cross. The largest humanitarian network in Germany and abroad is well aware that it will be the first to be called upon if something happens. And a major part of their work is done by their volunteers.
It is said that volunteering is the backbone of civil protection in Germany, and that's not an understatement. Without volunteering, very little can be done in civil protection in Germany.
Our volunteers play such a big, important role. 90% of civil protection in Germany is carried out by volunteers.
That is why, every year, the German Red Cross organizes a huge training exercise to help volunteers practice confronting extreme situations. In this year's training, there is an outbreak of Ebola in the fictional country of Nordernien. There, the German Red Cross receives the mission to deliver the necessary medical material for the outbreak, such as masks, medication, and vests. After a short briefing outside the warehouse, the Red Cross convoy gets on its way. We drive together with Christoph, who has been volunteering for more than 20 years with the Red Cross.
These trainings are important for us because they allow us to get to know each other. When we go into an operation, we're thrown together at random. And if you have to live in a truck cab with someone for 2, 3, even 4 weeks, it's better if you've met beforehand.
Volunteers like Christoph spend weeks on the road transporting goods of extreme necessity to catastrophe areas. He has seen firsthand some of the worst disasters of the last few years. As a result, he has a clear idea of the right mindset for everyday citizens in case of a crisis.
It's unthinkable that in the event of an incident, even just a blackout, the state or the district could provide everything people need. That simply won't work that quickly. And I believe people need to step out of their comfort zone and do more for themselves and for the community.
Working together as a team for the greater good, that's also the mission today with the training of the German Red Cross. After a control through customs and an accident on the highway where the convoy had to stop to help, the participants in the training are about to face the most difficult part of the day. In Nordernien, there have been recent clashes between the government and armed resistance forces called Free Nordernien. Even if the situation has calmed down, some of those paramilitary groups are still in control of certain areas of the country. None of the volunteers knows what is about to happen.
They don't know we're here, that's right. And if the situation requires it, if they leave their vehicles when they shouldn't, we'll respond as needed.
The goal is to prepare our crews as thoroughly as possible for humanitarian aid missions. These are nothing like a normal delivery on a German highway. In these operations, they face a wide range of challenges: damaged roads, destroyed infrastructure, and sometimes even dangerous areas they have to pass through. Our aim is to train them in a way that reduces the risks of such missions abroad as much as possible.
The convoy arrives and the paramilitary group starts the control.
Do you have papers? Again, you are here in our country and we make the rules. I want the papers for your vehicles so we can verify who you are.
This is an international relief convoy, approved and requested by the Nordernien government. I'm trying to explain what we are doing here.
I don't want an explanation. I already explained and told you what I want. Either you comply, or you will be detained here, and then that's it for you. And those relief supplies will stay here.
The convoy is under pressure as the paramilitary group thinks that they are transporting weapons.
We don't have all day for your nonsense. We've got other things to do. And if you can't show the papers now, fine. Then pack everything up. You are a guest here. You might be allowed to drive on, but that's it. The vehicle stays. period. Then we file a nice complaint brief and off to The Hague, a violation of international law. The German Red Cross is carrying military supplies. Case closed.
After a hard negotiation, the paramilitary forces finally let them go, and the convoy arrived safely to deliver the material for the Ebola outbreak. Mission accomplished. These trainings are fundamental to ensuring teams of prepared professionals and volunteers are ready for any inconvenience that could come along the way while on a rescue mission.
The challenges in civil protection have changed in recent years. Disasters are happening more frequently, even within Germany, something we were not used to before. And of course, there are also new and evolving threats that we are hearing more about publicly. That's why it is so important for us to train and prepare our emergency teams as broadly as possible, so they can respond effectively to any potential scenario in the future.
Being ready for the future is also one of the main goals at ARC's Robotics. With their technology, they are pushing the limits to gain a competitive edge against potential enemies. But, like many other newcomers, the company is faced with the concerns of a part of the population that the money invested will, down the line, be used for more war and conflicts. For Maximilian, the answer is clear.
Das, was wir hier machen, machen wir alles.
What we're doing here isn't to start a war, it's to prevent one. These systems we're building, and the industry behind them, are meant to show that we can defend ourselves. If anyone attacks us, we're ready and able to defend our country.
Und wir sind dazu vor allem in der Lage, uns zu verteidigen.
Nonetheless, the critical voices are growing in the country as they see how the big players in the German military industry are thriving, thanks in part to the investments of the government. Some examples are Hensoldt, whose stocks grew about 700% in 4 years, and Rheinmetall, whose stocks grew 1,700% in the same period. Those could be early signs of a militarized economy that, some fear, will destabilize an already fragile social system.
Ich bin gegen die aktuellen Aufrüstungsbeschlüsse.
I am against the current rearmament because I don't think it is the right approach. It's obvious that they come at the expense of social spending. Every euro spent on weapons is missing elsewhere. And that becomes especially clear when it comes to civil protection and healthcare.
Where is the money supposed to come from? Right now, it's all debt. We're basically financing rearmament on credit. If someone had told me a few years ago that this would be our strategy, I would have said, no way, that'll never happen. But here we are. And I can only shake my head. I really don't think this is the right path.
Das ist einfach nicht der richtige Weg.
Whether it is the right path for Germany or not, there is no way to know. The dangers and challenges that the country is facing are not easy. And a change of mindset will be needed. Christoph, on his way back home to Munich, has an idea on how to make it work.
The selfishness, the elbows out mentality. I really don't like it.
Ich fände es wesentlich attraktiver, wenn wir
It would be much better if we did things together and put our egoism aside for once.
mal etwas hinten anstellen.
Cooperation with each other to create a resilient civil protection and security is a good starting point while moving forward for Germany. And while leaving Christian's bunker, we wonder whether that could also be an option to avoid the military escalation that is happening right now in Europe.
In general, in Germany, everyone is thinking about what's coming, what's going to happen next. Of course, we have no influence over it. Ideally, there would be more talks acknowledging things as they are, finding a reasonable compromise, maybe even giving Russia some kind of assurance. Then I think we could build a foundation again. If trust can be rebuilt, I believe cooperation between countries could be possible again.